Okay, we are live. We're broadcasting on YouTube, Facebook, and LinkedIn. So if you're joining us, welcome. We've got Anne Donovan, who's our fearless leader at Xenium HR. Anne, thanks for coming.
Thanks for having me, Brandon. It's a delight to be here.
Yeah. So we're going to really just talk about the last year and what that's meant for you, the business, and because you're so well connected to, I think, with your, we're in the HR industry and you're part of a group called YPEO. You're also part of YPEO and you're on the boards of other organizations. So I think you have a really good perspective because you're probably talking with other people like you about how they're navigating the pandemic. So I wanted to just dive into that. And the first question I wanted to ask you was, at the beginning of this pandemic, so think back March of 2020. What was going through your head about your people? All the people at Xenium were about 90 employees, the business itself, the health of it, or perhaps clients too.
Yeah, that's a great question, Brandon. I think, when I think back to that time, you know me, Brandon, I'm an optimist and I'm ever hopeful. And so I remember at the time thinking, okay, we're going to be safe and do what it takes to make sure our employees are protected. We're following, the guidance and thinking, 4, 6 weeks, 8 weeks, maybe a couple months. The rest is history. We all know that was not anywhere near realistic. So, but I also remember feeling like safety was really important, that it was my responsibility as the leader of the company to make sure that we were making sure people felt as safe as we could possibly be, right? We used to working in the office all the time. We immediately moved home. We luckily had some fortuitous things happen. We had just launched Teams through Microsoft. And so we were prepared to quickly pivot to video conferencing for our meetings. And really 95% of our team moved to remote work. And it was pretty turnkey. So I feel really grateful about having that technology capability at the time that we did. But what was going through my head as we moved into April, it started to feel like, where is the end? We are a group of a lot of different companies in terms of what we see from a data standpoint. Payrolls that we run, we see headcount, and literally you could just watch the headcount come down from furloughs and layoffs. We have a couple of large restaurants, so of course they were very, and it was scary. It really was, because we just didn't know how far it was going to go down. And so it was really important to me to make sure that we continued to communicate to everybody on our team and and our clients as well. As much as we knew at the time that we knew it, we tried to be as communicative as possible.
Yeah, speaking of that communication, how much or how little did you communicate, not only to just, the people at Xenium, but to clients as well about resources? And because we're supporting them from a people perspective, HR and payroll and all that. So I'm sure there's levels of communication on both sides. What was that experience like?
Well, because it was such a dynamic environment and all of the rules and the laws, frankly, were changing as we spoke. So things were coming out from the Department of Labor that were impacting the way that companies needed to respond to their employees. So the FFCRA, right, which provided protection and pay for employees if they needed to be out for reasons of COVID, for reasons of their family and daycare situations. And the interpretation of those laws was very fluid, especially in the beginning. Now that's all sort of now, and it's funny looking back on it. We were getting different levels of guidance from different attorneys that we talked to. So it was a lot of late nights, lots of phone calls and clarifying, and then, just really pivoting with the guidance as the Department of Labor became more clear and published guidelines. So you helped us, Brandon, with, we had a COVID page on our website, right, where we had resources for people. That was really helpful because everybody needed to know kind of a baseline of information. And then, of course, there's always each client's unique circumstance where they needed to talk to an HR business partner.
Yeah.
That was where our HR BPs really needed help and support from our legal team just deciphering the unique circumstances for different company and industry.
What was different about this recession compared to the 2008 in terms of just your staff, even supporting the clients? Because like you said earlier, the headcount, because of our payroll processing that we do for clients, you see the headcount's dropping because clients are laying off staff, furloughing, work share, whatever it may be. What was really different about this, or if anything?
Yeah, it was so different in every way, if you think about it, because we always had this, when the pandemic eases or lifts, that we might have this like V-curve spike, right? Like it's went way down fast because businesses couldn't operate, or, you know, the impact of the industry they were in impacted them. And then, you know, this spike back. Well, the spike back didn't happen. It came back and then it hovered and bounced, because then, as you know, what happened was there were certain counties or certain industries that were then another surge, and they had to close or limit their capacity. So it really had this sort of, it did come back, you know, in the June, July, but it sort of hovered. And we made a commitment to keep our employees. So we really didn't have any, as you know, layoffs or furloughs. And that was something that was really important to me as a leader. It certainly was something I didn't know how long I would be able to maintain that commitment, but I was proud of the fact that we were able to keep all of those employees' jobs intact. And I think, honestly, I'm proud of that now, because, you know, there's lots of new activity happening as we come out of the pandemic. And I think the turnover issue that all of our clients are experiencing is something that's very real and will continue through the summer. So it's been great to have our team intact. I just think turnover is going to be a part of the universe for a period of time as the supply-demand situation continues to evolve.
Yeah, this is for the audience, but if you're tuning in from either YouTube, Facebook, or LinkedIn, feel free to drop Anne a comment, and I'll monitor the chat and the comments. So if you have a question for Anne, we'd love to submit it for her. What was, like, Anne, going back to just the overall last year, what are maybe like a couple of the biggest challenges that you experience as a leader, or somebody who's running a company?
I think that the unknown was one of the biggest challenges, is just being able to lead through something that the world, at least anybody who's alive today, had not experienced before. And you had to give it up for faith a little bit. You know, we had to make some assumptions about how things were going to go and just keep moving forward. It was difficult to see our employees struggling, because the workload in our world in HR, when a recession hits and companies are laying off, furloughing, you know, reducing their workforce, our work level goes up. It's spiked. Yeah. They need assistance.
Which is counterintuitive for most organizations. It is. Like, our work goes up, and most people's the work would dry up.
Exactly. And that happened in 08, 09 too. So we became as busy as ever. And yet, you know, the revenues in some cases are coming down. So it has this kind of counter effect. And our team had to work really, really hard. So there were a lot of like late night phone calls with our attorneys and just team members collaborating on, okay, now we're faced with this new situation. Let's make sure that we're doing the very best we can to give great advice. So that was hard. We always had a great team. So I feel really, you know, I have a wonderful leadership team around me, my senior leadership team and expanded leadership team at Xenium. And we've had a lot of consistency in that group. And so people had legacy knowledge that helped, you know, their team members push through unknown situations, because they had someone that they could look to say, hey, what do I do here? And that was really, I was grateful for that. You know, the whole PPP process was new and different, and we had to provide data for our clients so that they could get their PPP loans. And so we learned a lot about that and the nuances for making sure that they had all of the details that our clients needed in order to be able to apply for those loans. And then the employee retention credits, and on and on. I could list off, you know, 4 things, COBRA subsidies. It was all new. And I think that's the hardest thing, is that we didn't have the luxury of, you know, a law that's going to come out and then 6 months later it will be in effect. It was like in the moment. And I think that made us really good at what we do, though. And it It's really nimble. And I think in a lot of ways, it supported our culture of, we got this and I got your back. And that was pretty cool to see.
You mentioned uncertainty, and although there's still a lot of uncertainty, I think it's becoming a little clear what
Yes.
direction we're heading into. I mean, you're more positive than I am, but but I'm curious, like in the face of uncertainty, how do you yourself stay motivated and optimistic? And how do you, when you have 90 people relying on you as a leader, to be honest with them, but at the same time be optimistic and they're going to follow you? How'd you maintain that the last year?
I used the same techniques I've used my whole life, and I had to dig deep because this was harder. But one of the things when things are tough and I'm feeling, unsure or vulnerable, but knowing that I need to be strong for the team, it's striking that balance in between, as you said. You can't just let it all hang out, and when you're really feeling down and like you don't know what to do, it isn't appropriate to necessarily just flat all over your team. But you do have, your close folks that are sounding boards for you, that you need to say, hey, I need an ear. I need a sounding board to get some perspective. And I have many of those at Xenium. But my number one thing I do when things are really tough in the face of uncertainty is this too shall pass. And it's a reminder in the moment when things feel really stressful and unsure to say, we have smart people working around us. We're good people. So if good people making good decisions are in the landscape with me, we're going to get through this. This too shall pass, and tomorrow is a new day. And you're right. I tend to be maybe too overly hopeful when
it's inspiring for people. They need somebody to follow, and you're that person with the optimism.
Well, and it helps me sleep at night too. So I think I just have found these tricks and techniques in my own head of what do I need to do for me and my health, my family, and what do I need to do for my team and their health and their family. And it's always that striking that balance of making sure that you're being true to what's happening and saying it, not stuffing it or hiding it. And I've been accused in the past of be fine, it'll all work out. And what I've learned, and let me just tell you, Brandon, my sons tell me this, so it's a good reinforcement at home too, that sometimes things are bad, and sometimes you just have to listen and acknowledge that things are tough, and then help with this lift and we'll get through it together perspective instead of immediately moving into problem solving mode. Because that's been my probably error in the past, is I just want to help and I want to fix. Sometimes people they need to just be heard, acknowledge that it's hard.
When you're going through challenges specifically, that saying, it's lonely at the top. So in your case, I mean, you are the ultimate leader of an organization. A lot of people rely on you. How much do you have to rely on other people, though? Like whether it's peer networks, business consultants, anybody externally, but also internally, or even your family. Who's like within your circle of trusted people that help you get through challenging times like this? And how important it is for other leaders like yourself to have other people to rely on?
The most important thing about being successful in this job is having those people that you can go to and be that sounding board. So for me, it's everything you just listed off. I have a great family, a wonderful husband who.
I know your husband is amazing.
He's a great guy, and I always say he's the man behind the woman, because he is very wise. And sometimes when I need to just riff something with him, he's right there. My SLT senior leadership team is amazing, of which you are a part of. Smart people who understand what's going on and who have different perspective than me. And I always said I would never be a great dictator. As a kid, I was in sports. I always played team sports, and I loved having a team around me. I just feel it makes us all better and smarter to be able to help each other. So my senior leadership team was instrumental. And then you mentioned I have two peer groups. One is Young Presidents Organization, which I've been a part of for 12 years now. And that has been instrumental in, different businesses, different kinds of people. But when you come together and you have this shared experience of kind of the responsibility of running a company, the best thing about that group is I would find that I would think I was smooth sailing ship going along. And one of my peers would say, this is going on for me and I'm really struggling with it. And their revelation of what was going on for them made me realize, I didn't even realize it, but I'm struggling with that too. And so that peer group of being able to recognize, be vulnerable, and share deeply has been amazing. The last one is another peer group in our industry that formed really out of the YPO connections organizationally. We all run businesses that are similar to Xenium, but in non-competing other geographies. And we get together twice a year and we do best practices, deep sharing, full financials, everything. And that has been really transformational for our team, for me personally, but my ability to share our learnings with our team and grow from that. So I feel like I have a really good network to support.
Yeah. You mentioned the word vulnerability, and that's come up a lot because we read a book as a leadership team, Dare to Lead by Brene Brown. It's all about vulnerability and being open and showing yourself. And I imagine with those peer groups that you're talking about, being vulnerable is like probably the way that you get the most out of those groups. And I'm curious about when you're leading a company and showing yourself to your people, is there a level of vulnerability you'll go to without, seeming unstable? Or I don't know what your take is on that, but I'm curious, like what your balance is of vulnerability with people that are peer level versus your employees.
That's a great question, Brandon. I think it's something that each person has to dig deep and find the right place for them personally, because everybody's comfort level or willingness is in a different, call it a journey, right? Your vulnerability journey. And I've been on one my whole career. In my early years, I wasn't as vulnerable. I really felt like it was a duty and a responsibility to never let them see you sweat. That whole, and to not bring my burdens to my teammates. I just always felt that sense of responsibility. But over the years, what I learned was that they needed to see me being vulnerable. They needed to see me saying, you know what, I don't know what the answer to that question is. Maybe we can figure it out together. Or I'm going to keep thinking about it. That thoughtfulness and even the sleep on it factor was helping me. Because I'm a runner, as you know, and I do a lot of thinking and processing when I'm running. And it really has helped me kind of get to certain either just reflections or decisions that in the moment in my younger years, I thought I'd have right there.
Yeah.
Crazy. Nobody does. We're all human. And so just being able to say, I don't know, and to bring the team of smart people around me and get their feedback before I make a decision, that has been a godsend and something that I'm really grateful for. I'm still working on it though, like showing that ability and not, to your point, so much that it's over communicating, over sharing. I think all of us could probably err on the side of more vulnerability.
I think so too.
Brene Brown book, don't you think, Brandon?
I do. I think about it a lot because I tend to be an emotional person, and vulnerability I think comes with that because I'm open with sharing with, especially people I really, really trust. But I think if you want your people to show up at work and bring them their whole selves and put themselves, immerse themselves into the culture and be who they are, I think you have to model that as a leader too and encourage it.
I totally agree. And I think, this whole notion of inclusion, the DEI work, we've just embarked on a lot of work in this area over the last 2 years. We have a committee and it's really made me think. We've read a couple books for our book group area as well, as you know. And I think it's important to make sure that people feel and believe and know that they can bring their whole selves to their job and Xenium, and that's good and they're unique and they don't have to fit into a sort of check in and check out all your personal and the other things that make you who you are. And then, it's this like old school sort of format. I think the inclusiveness of you are who you are and you're bringing unique things to the table that are important for us to encourage and celebrate. That's been really good for us.
Let's get to a couple submitted questions from people because I think they're interesting. They're more on the business side.
Yeah.
How have you changed, and whether it's you or your entire leadership team, how have you changed your revenue generation approach due to COVID? Is there other revenue streams? Are you any sales or marketing approaches that you personally wanted to shift as a result of COVID?
We're very lucky as a professional services firm, and this technology shift of being able to basically move 95% of our workforce home and still be able to conduct business and do all the things that we do. There's a lot of industries and businesses that could not have done that. I will say virtual sales meetings is now like
game changer.
I don't think that's going to change. Like, why would we require our salespeople to drive 45 minutes, find parking, then drive back home? Now, I will say in some cases, it's important to be face-to-face. For sure. And there are some experiences and clients that will demand that, and we need to give it to them. But in many cases, those initial overviews, or let's talk about what we can build for you, the preparation, if you will, those things can be done really effectively over video conference. And so I think that has been a game changer for us. We do a lot of training and development, and Susie, our VP of training, has really pivoted everything to Zoom. She's a master at breakout rooms, as you know.
Yeah.
I think, people love that they don't have to drive into Xenium, and it just is so efficient. So that has changed. And I think while we will hybrid that, we will definitely still do training sessions in person. We will continue to offer a lot online and over video conference. Our business partners whose jobs are to drive all over the city to be at their clients, and can be harrowing as a job. You feel like you're running everywhere and trying to be all things to all people. And I think now there is a collective sort of sigh among the world that says, if this is going to be, as 90% effective by doing this over video conference, let's do that, because that makes more sense on the environment, right? Less cars driving around everywhere,
right.
Cost, and stress level. So I do think that's really, has our revenue model changed? Not necessarily, but the way that we do business has changed. And actually, I think in most cases, it's going to be really good for Xenium.
Yeah. You mentioned the word hybrid, and I'm sure business owners right now are sort of looking at each other like, "What are you going back to work? Are you like, what are you going to do long term? Remote?" There's a lot of organizations out there that are just like, we're staying remote. Others are probably taking the approach that you just alluded to, which is hybrid. Are you worried in any way about what hybrid could mean from an efficiency standpoint and an inclusion standpoint, or just sheer cost?
I'm not really worried about it, because I think the world will demand it. And I think for Xenium, it's actually in most cases a really good thing.
Yeah.
If we can give our employees and team members this flexibility to say, we trust you, we are here for you. Like, you're not out there in abyss and on your own, but you can get the people that you need when you need it. And it allows you to have that focus time from home and less interruptions. The flexibility to start and end your day a little differently, and save commute times. I mean, all these things that are such an improvement on people's lives. Xenium is really committed to people. That's who we are as a company. And so I feel like the hybrid model is the right way to go. And I do think some challenges that we and some of our clients will face are around, how do you make sure that you have a consistent platform, but you're also being thoughtful around different positions need different kinds of things, right?
Yeah.
So some you may still have essential workers that need to come in every day because of the nature of that job. And some like really analytical positions where that team presence isn't as critical, could they have more of a work from home scenario? And I think that's what we're evaluating right now. We surveyed our employees twice now because we want to know what that's the best way, like what would be best for you. And then as we evaluate those results, what I'm hearing from most of my peers running companies is that most folks who can are considering a hybrid model.
Yeah, that's good. Let's talk about culture.
Okay.
How do you maintain a company culture when it's completely fragmented, everybody's working remote, staring at a screen? I mean, is there any strategies that you've picked up on over the last year that it's like, yeah, this is the way to maintain what makes us so special? You know, what thoughts go through your head there?
You've been a part of one of our best ones, and that is we have an Excite committee, which is kind of our employee fun and recognition group that plans all of those events and those pieces of our culture. And when we all went home, we weren't getting together anymore to do those things. So our recognition program is a wow card where our employees can give each other these recognition notes that then we would, post on our PowerPoint at our all team meeting, and we would read a few in person. Well, we weren't meeting in person. You along with a couple others on our team helped us pivot, and now we create a wow video recording where it's actually in many ways better because
it is better.
Don't you think? We get all these wow cards in, and then 3 or 4 of us will read them out loud on this video. And then all of our employees, we record it. They can watch it whenever they have time. So if it didn't work, they had to miss a meeting, they would just miss it. And now it's forever accessible to them, and people get recognized publicly, and that warmth still really comes through when about telling your coworker, you did a great job on this. So that has been pretty transformational. I think you're on the Excite committee, Brandon, and we've continued to plan events. So Kahoot games and Halloween, and let's just say that it's not as much fun as being in person, right?
No, it's really not. It is a way to stay connected though. So that's what we have going for us. I mean, but you're right. Like we'll do events, we do book group. We have done Halloween, we've done happy hours. The Kahoot thing you're talking about is like trivia nights. I'm trying to think of what else we've done, but it's been, the year's gone by pretty fast. So there's a lot that we've done, but it's challenging to keep people connected. And I know a lot of business leaders are probably struggling with this right now. So I'm glad you shared perspective on it.
I would add one other thing that I think has been unexpected, and that is the breakout rooms, whether it's Teams or Zoom or whatever platform. I have found, because we do them pretty regularly in our all team meetings when we're doing kind of get to know you team building, I get put in a breakout room with 2 or 3 other individuals who I never interact with just because our jobs are different. And I get to know them in a way that I otherwise wouldn't. And it's intimate. Even though it's a screen, it's just the 3 of us. And we share stories and get to learn about each other's lives. And I think that has been a pretty great tool throughout this pandemic.
Yeah. What about people who are struggling? Mental health has been a topic I hear it all over the place, from sports to businesses to just regular people at home. I mean, people are struggling right now. As a leader, what are you doing to try to support that?
Yeah. It's a great question, Brandon. I think one of the things that's really hard for leaders is that we're all expected to make sure that we're there for our employees and we're helping support them, but we're all going through this stuff.
We're going through it together.
We're going through it together. So we're experiencing it as humans. And then we're also expected to be really strong for our team. And I think that's something that we have to acknowledge is this is impacting everybody, right? And so having those one-on-one conversations and the check-ins to say, how are you doing? Not just like going through the routine of the checklist and the work, but literally looking in someone's eyes and saying, how are you doing?
Yeah.
Open-ended. That I think is critical. And then having resources around us. We've used our EAP a few times to do some trainings on meditation and stress management. We've tried to really, because we are in HR, we need to be prepared to offer and support our clients with some of these ideas as well. And my biggest thing is let's make sure anything that we're building, we're giving to ourselves, right? And we're trying to transform our own workplace alongside the work that we do for all of our clients. So, but we're not counselors. I guess that's the other thing I would say, is that we're not licensed and trained in the area to help with things like mental health. So knowing where we need to get expert resources involved and make that referral or that introduction so that they're not just out there on their own. Because if people are at home and working, having daily huddles, team meetings and one-on-ones, if you don't have that, I think that this remote workforce could be really lonely, and that could create more mental health issues. So a lot of huddles, a lot of one-on-ones, that's what's, I think, saved us.
Yeah, we've in the HR space, we've talked about the importance of one-on-ones. In fact, like a lot of organizations, including us, are moving more away from the annual review process to more of like one-on-ones and ongoing development conversations. But the value of the one-on-one cannot be understated this year, especially because you're talking about connection. If people are lonely, those one-on-ones are a really good point to just check in with your people. And you posed a question that was like, how are you doing? Like, and actually mean it. But I want to take it a step further. A colleague of ours, Gabrielle, actually suggested this in an Excite meeting to start one-on-ones with a 1 through 10. How are you doing right now?
Yes.
And it serves as a good talking point. It's like, okay, it's a 6. What's going on? And then you can ask further questions and listen, really.
Yeah, I think that's brilliant. We do it in YPO. We start our meetings with, kind of ranking how you are, how you're feeling, whether it's business, personal, or family. Brandon, you and I were in an action leadership group where we learned together in cohorts, and we started our meeting with that. It gives you this sort of place to know where people are at. And if someone says I'm a 2, then we need to dig in and help support that person, because that's meaningful, And so I think it's a great way to, and then warm-up questions are another great way to just, we're all very busy. There's so much to do. If we skip over this fact that we're all humans and we have lives and hopes and dreams and sadness, it just loses that quintessential human factor, which is really why I get up and do what I do every day. So I think that's a really important thing that's helped us stay connected too.
I want to tackle one more really, really important subject right now, and then I want to talk about you a little bit before we part. But for those listening and watching on social media, feel free to drop a comment or a question for Anne, and I'll make sure to get it in before we end the broadcast. Okay, what's the state of hiring right now? The market is so weird, and I'm just curious what your perspective is on it, like what's going on.
Yeah. So, we have a sister company, Express Employment Professionals, and their whole purpose and job is to find people, right? And right now, they have so many openings, so many jobs, and not enough candidates to fill them. So there is a supply and demand issue, number one, for probably many different reasons. But that is absolutely impacting ourselves. We have a lot of job openings right now in a way that we don't normally, and our clients as well, because there's not as many candidates who are actively applying for these jobs. So I think this sort of economic supply demand issue of people are now coming out of the pandemic, they're ordering more, and there's not enough people to fill the jobs to get the product or the service to everyone. And I'll just give an anecdotal story. My sister recently changed jobs, and she said that about a month ago, she really saw the difference, that it was like, I don't know what happened in the pandemic, but something flipped and she could not keep up with the inquiries from recruiters.
Wow.
And it really, I think the faucet just turned.
But what's happening though? Like, why can't we find people? Or is it truly just their businesses is getting back to normal-ish, and the demand is there on the product or service side, and there's just not people?
Yes,
is it that?
I think it's both. And some people stopped looking, right? They came out of the workforce and they're not going back. Some people maybe are still on unemployment and they're not yet ready, either whether it's fear, although I think that is waning quickly with, just the direction of the pandemic. But it's the supply demand. I think there was a fear factor for the year of the pandemic where people felt like now's not the time to leave because I need to protect my job. I need to protect my family, keep my benefits, because I don't know what the grass being greener or not greener on the other side. And now I think people see light at the end of the tunnel. And so people are moving. And if they were unhappy in their job or even just wanting to try something new, it is collectively happening in the universe. And so people are exiting jobs, turnover is happening, and there are not enough people in the candidate pool to fill those jobs that are being exited. Yep. It's like economic supply demand.
I want to expand on that because it's like the most basics of economics. It's supply demand. It's like microeconomics 101, right? And I think what we're going to run into a problem is, and I think we're already seeing it more probably in the food and home side, is that when you have a lack of supply, but lots of dollars being thrown at limited supply, prices have to rise.
Yes.
You're going to see that with the wages, I think. So
absolutely.
Because the top talent is already employed, you're going to throw you're talking about market wages being impacted by this. What do you see in the future?
I think in certain positions in industries that are just in more demand are going to shoot up even higher, but the collective wages will go up. They are going up, and we can see that in our data that we source for our compensation surveys that we do as a service. Absolutely. And I think you asked what was different about this recession from the last recession. In this case, everything shut down. That was the feeling of it. We just sort of shut down as a world.
It's all pent up.
Pent up, yeah. And a lot of companies did not give any raises, let alone, many of them were laying and riffing employees. So that had a kind of stamping down layer. And then as we're coming out of that year and people are moving, it's going to push that back up because now people are hiring and it's going to be competitive for people. So wages will drive up.
Yep. I'm going to ask this audience submitted question verbatim because it's a pretty good one. And I've heard this coined a couple different ways, but I think you'll appreciate this one. So how is Xenium preparing for what we have been hearing about the turnover tsunami that's set to hit hard in 2021, 2022? So I think the idea behind this is that retention is going to be the biggest issue going forward, is what we just talked about with the market dynamics in wages, is you might have headhunters, recruiters, savvy HR people, hiring managers, pulling people with lots of money away from their current employers, and that will be what's called the turnover tsunami. You'll just have a mass exodus. So what's your take on that?
Well, two things. I think that because that is such a real phenomenon, employers have to plan further in the future than they normally would, right? Plan for turnover. In other words, you don't have an open position. Someone hasn't left, but it's going to happen. So you start recruiting for that position. And maybe there's certain pockets of your business where the risk of turnover is higher and you can't afford to not have those positions filled. So those you hire in advance, which is, hard for employers because it's not in the budget. Right? It doesn't, what's happening today does not dictate that you would do that, but you have to do it anyway. The other thing that we know is true, and this time of our world does test this theory, but we do surveys every year. We've been doing them for decades. Money is not the number one thing. It is for certain people, but when you survey all of the people, it's generally third or fourth on the list of what's most important to me in my job. So one of the things that I think is really important, you can't not pay people. You have to be at a baseline to make sure, because people will move at some point, but you also have to have great leadership, great support for employees, and a really good culture where people feel like I could leave and go somewhere and make 10 or 15% more, but I really I'm fulfilled by the work that I do and the people that I work with, the flexibility that I get from my employer. And I might not have those things in those new companies. I think it's this kind of holistic approach of making sure you've got all those pieces in place, because tsunami is probably the right word. I think, and I don't know how long. I mean, my gut is at least 6 months.
Yeah. The one other question I wanted to ask you about just this whole weird situation we're in. Okay, let's say an employer pulls some talent and they have to pay for it. Maybe we're paying 20% over market. What does that do to the current staff in terms of like pay compression and really pay equity issues? Because now it's a law. So what's your, what would you tell employers about that?
Yeah, I think that is a really good question, Brandon, and it's contingent upon the employer. So the leadership team at Xenium, as an example, to continue to evaluate that pay compression impact. And by doing a pay equity study, at least every 2 years is what we recommend. But that way you are doing right by your internal folks. Even if you're pressured to bring in people at a higher wage, you also then have to look at the rest of your employees and make sure that you don't have pay equity issues. Not only because that's the law, but also just because it's the right thing to do. It does not feel right to have that situation where you've got disparity. It takes time for companies to recover from that. So it's very intentional. It means you can't just like scoot it under the carpet and say, I'll deal with that later. You really got to look at what you can do, because there's always a finite amount of money to deal with, right? The budget is there. So you have to be really strategic and thoughtful about it. And, we do compensation structures with tools to help companies do that. And I'm really proud of the work that Tyler on our team does.
Yeah, Tyler's amazing.
We use that tool, and it has helped me as a leader tremendously to have the structure in place that I can go to, and it's got data, and it helps our leaders make good decisions. These are challenging problems, and they're not going to go away anytime soon.
As a leader, especially on the topic of compensation, on a scale of like 1 being not sharing any information with employees about compensation to 10 fully transparent, everybody knows everybody's salaries and whatnot, where do you like philosophically stand on that spectrum?
Yeah, I liked the way I think about it in my head is I like to be as transparent as we possibly can. And for us, that means that we've created pay bands inside our compensation structure so that when someone applies for a position, they know what pay band they fall into. They may not know every single peer's exact pay, but they have a very good sense for what that kind of low to high range would be based on experience, contributions, all of those things. To me, that is good transparency.
Right.
Is creating the structure that shows what people can make in each of those jobs. So 1 to 10, I mean, I would say 7.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
Yeah.
All right, let's end with a rapid fire about you. Okay. Scale of 1 to 10, how optimistic are you about the next year?
10, actually. I mean, as all these problems are, I think there's going to be so much opportunity coming out of the pandemic. So 10, optimistic.
As a leader of a company with about 90 employees, how do you spend your time?
Wow. Yeah, I'm in a lot. As you can imagine, I have a lot of those days with 7 to 10 Zoom calls. Oh my gosh, those are tough. But I really try to stay engaged with each of the different areas of our business so that I'm not unaware of what the challenges are for each of those department leaders and contributor folks as well. We need to be preparing for this turnover issue, how do you find great people, and how do you make sure that we're doing really good work that is relevant and timely for our clients? Because again, we're an employer for our employees, which is super important. And then what we do for a company is helping other clients do the same thing.
As a president, spending your time more on operational stuff or people development?
Right now, I would say I am an equal mix of both. I would love to be in the people side. I'm an HR person by practice and training, and I love the people development, the leadership development side of what I do. I find it the most fulfilling. I am just the nature of business today. There's a lot of operational things to work on. So I find myself there right now a lot. I would say it's 50-50, but if I was choosing for the future, my intentions will be more people leadership.
Work-life balance or work-life integration, and how do you practice one or the other?
For me, I would say it is work-life balance. I'm a runner. I run every morning, and it makes me sleep at night. It makes me a happy person, and it keeps me healthy. So that is number one for me in terms of just the physical. How do I stay happy and active? Um, I have loved this hybrid idea of being able to not have a commute times a week, and that has made a difference in my life. And I am, of course, really connected to all of our employees and our team members. So, it is about getting the right work done. And for me, there isn't a start and stop to the day necessarily, but I've found great ways to create boundaries. So when the important things are happening, I can shut it down and compartmentalize. And that has been a gift for me, is to be able to set that aside for now.
I don't know if you can tell, but I'm in the office today, and the commute is just brutal. So I'm with you. The hybrid approach is way better. I do not miss commuting at
I
all.
know it's a huge part of everybody's day. And think about, from a stress level, from a time, from a cost, in many ways, I think this hybrid model will help each and every one of our employees.
So speaking of the commute time, let's say you've got 30 minutes one way, and in an ideal world, if you had an extra hour per day that you're going to use towards something very specific, what are you using that for?
Oh my goodness. Well, my kids are home. I have two boys. They're home. So I'm able to connect with them in the mornings, and I'm home sooner so I can help make dinner, which I never used to be able to do. So instead of, a 30-minute drive home and then get gas and all those things, I'm here. And so I'm really connected to my family right now. And I have a senior in high school who's off to college next fall. So I'm really grateful for those extra moments. And having all of us here has been the gift of one of those bright spots in this whole past year.
People listening, make sure to re-listen to what Anne just said. She didn't work an extra hour. She wants to use it for her family. So as a president, she's modeling the behavior that most of us should be using. For the extra hour, she's using it for family time. Just make a mental note.
I'm trying, Brandon.
I should have asked this earlier, but it was one of the questions that came in what ways are you investing in the organization during this weird time? And in what ways are you pulling back on expenses?
Yeah, one way that we pulled back on expenses was really, I was kind of proud of us. And I was proud because this didn't come from me. This came from one of our awesome payroll supervisors. We have a remote team in Vancouver, basically to accommodate some folks who lived up there. And they couldn't do the drive any longer. I mean, talk about half an hour. It was an hour one way. And so we created a little executive suite up there, and 2 became 5 because recruitment wise, we were just able to find a lot of great payroll people in Vancouver. Well, we get about 6 months into the pandemic and they've been working from home. Nobody's going to that executive suite. And Christy Roberts, our payroll supervisor, said, why are you paying the money for that suite? When we get together, we go to lunch and we have our team meetings and we're super well connected. Let's drop that lease. And we did, and it saved money for the company. So in that regard, it was just hit the easy button. And, maybe in the future we'll want one and we'll go back to it. Never say never. But for now, those folks are going to be working remote indefinitely. And I think that was great that Christy was the one that suggested it. We're investing in DEI. So we have some consultants, that really great folks that we've been working with over the last 18 months. And we need training, and because our HR business partners are being asked by their clients, what do we need to be doing to put together a DEI committee to make sure that we're getting the training to our leaders and our employees to create the culture that we want, that we intend to have. And it's not easy work. Are not trained in it. So we've been investing in consultants to help with some of that DEI training. Those are just a couple of things I would say that come.
That's good. 2 quick questions, then I'll let you go.
Okay.
What's a goal personally or professionally that you have for this year?
For this year.
What are you working on right now for yourself?
Oh my goodness. Oh, personally, professionally. Well, personally, it's to make sure that my oldest son gets settled and launched at college. He's off to the University of Oregon this fall. So it's a big deal to have, your first child go off and not live in your home anymore. So we're prepping for that. So that's a big goal of mine and my husband's. Professionally, it's growth. We need to grow our way out. We actually fared pretty well, as you know. We ended up pretty flat last year in terms, we didn't go backwards, but we need to grow now. And growing takes a unique, different kind of strategies. And so taking some risks and trying new things. And so the plan really for the rest of this year is to focus on growth and also retention, and because both are critical to that result.
What's on your reading list, whether it's books that you want to read soon or that you currently are reading? And I know you always have a couple that you're reading at one time. But.
I do. Right now, I'm reading So You Want to Talk About Race, which is our book group book that you picked for us, Brandon. I'm really enjoying it. And this is the second book that we've read in that realm. So I'm really enjoying it. And the weather's been nice. I've been sitting out in my backyard and reading that. And it helps me every day. It is one of the topic is something that I think everybody should read because it's really educational and also just really interesting societally. And then I have a couple that are just on my desk that I haven't, I want to, because I'm a kind of a one-at-a-time person. It's hard for me to have 2 or 3 going at the same time. So I'm focusing on that one right now.
Amazing. Anne Donovan, President of Xenium, thank you for spending, it's been 51 minutes with me, being so open and vulnerable for everybody to listen to. So appreciate you so much. And for those who tuned in live or are watching the recorded version, thank you so much. Drop a comment, let us know how you're watching. And feel free to share this. The recording will be available forever. So share it with your team, peer leaders, anything like that. So just thank you so much.
Thanks, Brandon. I appreciate it.